This week on This is America and the World, we continue our conversation with a group of former U.S. ambassadors talking about the U.S. image abroad. The ambassadors have served in Denmark, Saudi Arabia, Costa Rica, and South Africa, and bring a terrific range of experience and insight to the table.
Travel figures, more and more Americans are traveling overseas.
One of the other key elements to this, certainly for me but elsewhere, was the education piece as well, because the most effective way of bridging cultural gaps is getting young people from both countries going back and forth.
Right.
And so a big part of what I focused on was trying to get more Saudi students into the U.S., being educated here, because at the end of the day, they're the best ambassadors coming back to Saudi Arabia to talk about the U.S. and our values and all that they've learned here.
Do you notice? Did you notice a change? Whereas in the old days, people from other countries wanted to come here and live here and stay here. Now, I seem to sense a little shift where they want to come here, experience, maybe get an education, and then go back home. Huh?
Boy, if we would make it easier for them.
To
immigration is one of the great the failures.
I agree with Don. I think many people still would like to come here and they'd like to stay here, but we've made it very difficult for people to come and work in the United States, let alone to come and try to establish themselves and become residents. And
so ironically, one of the arguments I had to use on this point, because I believe this as well, you know, for us to educate all the brightest people in the world and then force them to go home is crazy.
It's crazy.
But that was the argument I made in support of 5-year multiple entry visas for Saudi students, which had the State Department, everybody up in arms, where, you know, we could never do this. And one of my arguments was, look, they come, they pay the full tuition cost.
Yes.
And then they all go home.
Yes.
You're not chasing them around to try, you know, they all go home. Everybody thought this was wonderful. So this was one of the arguments that actually won the day, which is the wrong argument. It's actually absolutely
good to win the day, but it's the wrong.
And you were visiting all the science and technology schools there. Those are the kind of people that we need desperately.
The other part of this is, again, I'm being Saudi-centric, but over $2 billion a year is pumped into this economy by Saudi students and their families who come over and buy apartments and, you know, lives 5-6 months of the year here. It's a very substantial value add on the financial side as well. And that gets lost when people talk about foreign aid and all the rest of it. What are we getting? You're just thinking about giving money to countries. There's an awful lot that comes back as a result of these soft diplomatic initiatives that we do, education being one of them.
Hold on that note, say to the folks at home who are just joining our conversation, we're talking with 4 former U.S. ambassadors from representing us in South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Denmark, and Costa Rica, and we're trying to take a look at the U.S. image abroad. So sit tight, we'll take a little break. Back on the other side. This is America and the World.
This is America and the World is brought to you by the National Education Association, the U.S.-China Education Trust, and the F.Y. Chang Foundation, guided by Ambassador Julia Chang Block, President. The League of Arab States, representing 350 million people in 22 member countries. ANA, Japan's largest airline with an extensive network throughout Asia. Japan, history, hospitality, and advanced technology, sharing tomorrow. The Republic of Kazakhstan, a rich history and a future of development and growth. The Rotondaro Family Trust. The Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings, and Ventana Productions, television facilities, editing, and distribution services.
We have a possibility of going to Africa, take the show there. We've just come back from Japan. We were in Japan for a couple of weeks. My Lord, the cleanest, safest, most polite society I've ever been in. Puts some of it, us to shame here. I'm wondering about U.S. culture abroad. Is it just permeate every country, our music, our television, our films? And how does that register with the people?
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. Yes,
It
yes, yes, and
permeates
yes.
everywhere. And the Danes speak wonderful English, and most of them speak American English, as do they in many countries, because they've watched our movies, they've watched our TV shows, and it's now the language of the internet. But you know, I think that there is a reaction of sorts, even in a small, friendly country like Denmark, where when you see everybody speaking English and reading English, you want to protect your Danish in this case. I'm only using Denmark as an example, but yes. So they want to protect their language, they want to protect their culture, they want to protect their artists. And so
The fear of getting swallowed
I
up
think
by
it's
American culture?
Fear of the culture being lost over the long run.
What was your experience?
Well, let's say I went to the Red Hot Chili Peppers concert in Costa Rica, and it was great. And it was packed with lots of ticos, and you know they all knew the words.
Wow! So
I
it's
think
all there. But some of our music, some of our films are explosive, exploitive, explicit in some of the lyrics in the music. Does that show us off well, Ambassador?
I would ask that same question back here.
Yeah, but I mean,
I don't think it's any different at home than it is here. You know, in Africa, it's a
do they
little
get the right view of America
Well,
through
Africa's local culture is still very vibrant, so it's a mixture. I mean, if you watch television in South Africa, you know, there's some American shows, but it's dominated by South African shows and other African content. So it's not that overwhelming. It's there for people who want it, and there are a lot of people who want it, but it's not the mainstays of the culture.
They worry about this in Saudi Arabia a lot because Saudi is a culture very closed, very private. The outside world, little penetration before cable TV. So they worry about that. But when you see the Saudi youth, and I'll give you one example, we threw a 4th of July party as we do every year at the residence, and we had a live band on stage. And towards the end of the evening, to see young Saudis dressed in traditional garb up on the stage, waving American flag, singing "Born in the USA."
Bruce translates well anywhere.
There you go. There you go.
was a wonderful sight to see.
We've been in Oman a couple of times, and the traditional dress, they're concerned that it may start to disappear.
So I think the cultures in the Middle East are so deep and religiously based as well that you're not going to see a revolutionary change in that sense. But for sure, all the McDonald's and the fast food franchises, all the young Saudis love pulling up in their cars and doing that. Yeah,
Kentucky Fried Chicken
Chicken,
is very
the whole
present in
thing.
South Africa, but they call it KFC, and it was considered one of the great local brands. People thought it was South African. They didn't even realize.
Are we getting involved in a religious war
where?
in the Middle East with the Sunnis and Shiites?
Yeah, so
are we in the middle of a religious war?
So, for sure, there have been for thousands of years these divisions between Sunni and Shia, but also tribal issues and cultural issues. I mean, Iranians, to the surprise of most Americans, they're Persians. They're not Arabs.
Yes, right.
These are different ethnicities and cultures
Do we
for many thousands of
understand
years.
the cultures?
Not well enough
No.
is the answer. And part of the problem is on the countries themselves because they don't really welcome foreigners. So they haven't been that open, and they don't export themselves very efficiently. So there are issues on both sides as to who's to blame for that.
I want to ask, Ambassador, has our history with race played a huge role in our ignoring Africa? Our own history here in the United States?
No, I'd say the Cold War played a much bigger role in how we shaped our policies in Africa.
How so?
Fear of Soviet Union, there were a bunch of liberation movements that were coming up. The Soviets joined with those liberation movements, and we went on the other side, which is exactly what happened in South Africa. We viewed the ANC as a terrorist organization because they had ties to the Soviet Union. We branded Nelson Mandela a terrorist. He was actually officially a terrorist on our State Department lists for a very long period of time, even after he came to power, after he was released from prison. So we just looked at Africa through that Cold War lens, and it was a very grave mistake. Bobby Kennedy, in the 60s, in the height of apartheid, came to South Africa, and there's a great documentary movie on this. And he was giving a speech in Cape Town, and he was really trying to understand apartheid. And a student there got up and said, how can America be, white student, how can America be on the wrong side of this debate? And you could see Kennedy sort of take a step back and think, and he said, too often we react out of our fear rather than out of our values. And it basically led to him rethinking our stance.
This playoff between values and interests over the years is a really interesting debate, and President Obama made this point at one point when Libya was going on, and he was being pressed about U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. And he basically said, look, our policy in the Middle East is going to vary from country to country. And in each country, we will measure our interests and our values, and they're going to be different in each country because the circumstances are different. Now, this is a hugely wise statement. The problem, of course, is implementing policy following on from that, and that's the challenge that any president has.
And explaining that to the rest of the world.
So that they understand that. Because everybody wants, well, what is the U.S. Middle East policy? When you say the Middle East, what are you talking about? You have to be pretty micro and specific about what you are talking about before you can come up with a policy that makes real sense. But this trade-off between values and interests is an interesting one. And in Africa, I would say that the trade-off has always gone on the part of our interests. What are our interests, not what our values are.
And now we have an opportunity to change that because our values and interests can be aligned because Africa is pursuing democracy, trade, things that are very consistent.
Is our role in the world changing? We're the only superpower. Really, I think that's true. But do people expect too much of us?
I will say it's interesting when you think, while certainly the U.S. continues today as the superpower, it was interesting to observe in Costa Rica and Central America the role that China was beginning to play. And as the U.S. Tries to do this balancing of values and interests, and tries to encourage countries like Costa Rica, who are now almost developed and are no longer receiving significant amounts of aid from the United States, to give them a go, making it on their own, China comes in right behind us. And China builds a stadium for the Costa Ricans. They used all of Chinese materials, they used Chinese workers. And then Costa Rica says, and so who's our new best friend? It's China.
Africa.
It's China.
In Africa.
And China
it's
in
been a very
Africa, my
effective
lord.
policy.
Yeah, China's
Just sinking
far and
money
away
in
the
there.
largest trading partner. But it's more than just money. I mean, they're doing trade. They're so it's, as ambassador was asked this question all the time. Is the United States losing Africa to China? The answer is Africa wants both, and they want us competing against each other. We need to make sure it's a level playing field. But the investment that's required in Africa, the amount of infrastructure that needs to get built, is an opportunity for China. It's an opportunity for Africa, Europe, the Middle East. It's going to take us all. But where we need to play is making sure there's a level playing field, that the African governments have the capacity to make sure that corruption is not a part of what drives decision making. Those are the types of places we can make a difference.
So we have a kind of a shifting image, though, abroad, don't we? I mean, we're not number one exclusively anymore, are we?
I think a number of countries wonder whether China will supersede the United States in terms of, economics in particular, and economic assistance. But if you look at, has the role of the United States changed? It's changed some since the Cold War, but it's remained somewhat the same since the Cold War. And that is, we are the country that everybody comes to when they want help. When they want help, they come to us. It doesn't matter if it's a natural disaster. It doesn't matter if schoolgirls have been kidnapped. It doesn't matter if
The plane goes down. and,
exactly. They come to us. At the same time, many people around the world think we are way too intrusive, and so there's this interesting, I think, conflict even of how we're seen around the world.
And the American people are tired. The American people are debating what level of involvement we can have around the world and what can we afford.
What can we afford, right? Because
Well, and I think countries are, to use your values and interests, I mean, I think many countries are also trying to balance their values and interests. And I think, again, just speaking of countries like Costa Rica, they very much want both China and the United States.
Yes.
And their interest is to have both of us there with our money, but their values, I mean,
Would be
they
us.
very much understand the shared democracy and the value of democracy and transparency and governance. And that's something that I think we, at the State Department and as diplomats, need to make more clear the value that the U.S. brings with regard to our commitment to transparency and democracy.
when we've talked about our values, are we really just talking, not just, that's not a good way to say it, but are we really talking about democracy and everything that flows from it, or are we talking about being patriotic, being generous, freedom?
Democracy is part of it, but it's it's honesty, transparency, character. It's all the things that we think make them.
Entrepreneurialism.
But it's also human rights, respect for the individual. I mean, I think it is. If we had our druthers, yes, it would be some kind of constitutional form of government, and respect for individual rights. And I think, if you look around the world, we take for granted in the United States our individual rights and our limited government. But less than half the countries around the world have that tradition right now. And way less than half the people around the world live in countries where they have the rights that we do. And I think that's one of our fundamental issues with foreign policy is Americans don't fully understand the differences between our system and where other people are. And it's very complicated for us, I think, also to try to assist, particularly women around the world. For decades, I've believed that we're not going to have a stable globe, a secure and stable globe filled with, prosperous and working countries until women are full participants in their countries. But how do we help them? I did a conference on this in Denmark with the Nordic Baltic countries and, looking at countries emerging from conflict. How can we be most effective? And the barriers are mostly cultural.
Yes.
They're cultural and legal barriers in those countries. So how can we be effective in that? We can't be effective coming in and saying, do it our way.
Exactly. The finger wagging and the moralizing and sermonizing is so obnoxious and upsetting to many foreign cultures.
So it's just to build on that, the LGBT issue in Africa is a big hot button right now. Both Uganda and Nigeria have passed very horrible laws, disgraceful laws. Yet, how do you push back appropriately on that so that they hear instead of just say that's the United States lecturing us again?
So one of the things
It's very tricky.
it's one pathway, of which I know there are many, but one pathway is how do you build within the country a group of people who have a business interest in the values that we value. So people who care about transparent government, who care about having intellectual property rights. And that's investing in entrepreneurs, and women entrepreneurs.
It's engaging
those people because the goal is they will then rise up and they will ask their governments to be transparent.
We're not
to
going to
protect
change the
human
governments
rights.
by
Exactly.
lecturing them. It has to
Absolutely.
be. It has to be internal, and it has to be generic.
Absolutely.
And what you've described is the right way forward for many of these cultures that we don't really even understand properly.
We are about 5 minutes or so before the end of our time. What have we not discussed that you would just feel we've missed the boat? Something that you've been thinking about and saying, well, I wonder if he's going to bring up this. I was at a little dinner the other night, and a gentleman who's very successful here in the United States from Pakistan said, the world will change when women are in prominent, he said, they will change the world. They will change the world. And I said, what a provocative statement. Women will change the world. But boy, long way, huh?
It's
long way away.
It's a long way, but I think Anne said several things that I really
Maybe
think
not so long, we'll see.
that I agree with and I think are important, and that is, you know, we can do several things to help women get there. One is to try to identify local, homegrown initiatives in various countries where we can support some of the, whether you want to call them NGOs or whatever, because local women in different countries might have a different view of what their ideal life is than we would have for them. So we can support that. The other thing I think that's important is it's economically, it makes sense for countries to want to educate women and get them involved in governments and in
The more women, the
businesses.
more success.
Exactly. So you see Coca-Cola, among others, has this big initiative now to get women involved in their entire, you know, trade stream. And of course it makes economic sense for them as a company. It makes economic sense for countries. So I think part of what we can do in terms of entrepreneurship is helping
it's big.
support that.
But think about this, that in this country, with the legal system in place and all the social structures in place, women don't earn as much as men do, and no woman has even come, no woman so far has even come close to being elected, either vice president or president of the United States.
Right.
So this country, which has all of that going for it.
Yep.
So then look outside.
And
at all
you
the
turn the
countries
clock back to 1970s. I mean, we were just starting
Yeah.
our whole business of women's liberation.
Oh yeah,
I guess, at that time.
I couldn't buy a car by myself when
Yep.
I was
Yep.
a young woman.
Yeah.
Can I make one other switching subject?
Yep.
But how proud I was to lead the incredible people in the State Department. You know, you had more of an experience of having military presence in your country. We had a very small one, but I thought our career diplomats who are putting their lives quite often on the line around the world, disrupting their lives, serving our country, do an amazing job. So just, I want all the American people to know
that's nice.
how well served they are by the incredible diplomats that we have around the world.
Right.
And if I could add, which having grown up the way I did, I never had a lot of firsthand relationships or experience with our young Marines, but we had young Marines at our embassy, and I tell you, my hat goes off to those kids.
Oh, wow. We are coming down to the end of the time. I put it on how has being an ambassador changed you?
I learned an incredible amount about the United States, how unique we are, both because we are the land of immigrants and we are the melting pot, although maybe not perfect, but we also have no history of absolutism. We don't, and so we mistake sometimes, I think, the degree with which people abroad don't trust when they see something on YouTube, they don't trust that it's not the United States government because they have no experience with anybody other than their government putting things out. So,
Ambassador, how did it change your life?
So it gave me a much greater appreciation for how important it is to be engaged in the political process here if you want to change some of the things that are going on outside there. What I used to say as a Wall Street banker, you know, I've spent most of my career trying to avoid Washington, D.C. But my time as ambassador made it crystal clear to me how important it is to be engaged in the policy debates and issues for the countries that you care about.
Ambassador, how did it change you?
I had the great pleasure of having my 3 boys and my wife with me in South Africa. And when we talk about this, we all say it made us, we already were patriotic, it made us that much more patriotic because you see what we can and should be in the world, and it makes you want to come back to your point and help us achieve that potential.
You had kids there as well, right?
I did, and you know, one of the things
Costa
that
Rica.
you know, I came away with such a respect and a passion for democracy and what democracy means. I mean, it is what gives us our human rights. It's what, you know, it's what gives us a functioning government, and it's what gives people a say-so and an engagement in what that government is. And you know, it's interesting, what did my kids take away from it? I will tell you, my son, we came back to the United States to go on a college tour, and we were going down a highway, and he says, "Mom, just a minute, do you hear that?" I said, "I don't hear anything." He said, "That's right. this road, this highway, it works. And I said, you know what? That's government that works, and that makes a difference. So my kids learned what it means to have a good government.
Thank you all very much for a terrific conversation, and I think that the folks at home will just have an appreciation for your role in serving our country abroad, and a lot of the ideas that we've kicked back and forth. Thank you so much. Good to be with you. Thank you all for watching.
For information about This Is America and the World and online video for all of our programs, visit our website, thisisamerica.net. And now you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. This Is America and the World is brought to you by the National Education Association, the U.S.-China Education Trust, and the F.Y. Chang Foundation, guided by Ambassador Julia Chang Block, President. The League of Arab States, representing 350 million people in 22 member countries. ANA, Japan's largest airline with an extensive network throughout Asia. Japan, history, hospitality, and advanced technology. Sharing tomorrow. The Republic of Kazakhstan, a rich history and a future of development and growth. The Rotondaro Family Trust. The Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings. And Ventana Productions, television facilities, editing, and distribution services.